Hey everyone. We are moving on again to chapter 6, the play therapist. So you're going to learn about the role of the play therapist and kind of how to navigate that role. So just one second, and I'm going to share my screen again. All right. All right, the play therapist. So the therapist does not direct, probe, or teach, which we kind of covered in the last chapter. The therapist responds to the child in a way that helps them fully maximize their ability to self-direct. The therapist does not praise, scold, or make decisions for the child. So this is where the challenge kind of comes in. I think most people would not obviously know that they're not going to be scolding the child in therapy, but praising is a really natural thing that I think we do with a lot of children. We say, oh, that is such a pretty picture, or wow, you're so smart, or you're so strong, or you're so capable. You know, we might say those different types of things, and those are wonderful in life, but in the playroom, we don't want them to become overly dependent, and we don't want them to become we don't want to direct their behavior in any way. So if you praise a child, you're going to inherently direct their behavior. So for instance, if you say, wow, that's a beautiful tower, they might spend the next 10 minutes continuing to work on that tower to please you instead of to express their feelings or whatever emotions they might have. So for example, if the child, Chris, says, what color should I paint this frog? The therapist says, and here you can decide what color you want the frog to be. I don't know, would black be okay? Are some frogs black? My teacher said frogs are green. And you would say, you like to paint your frog black, but you're not sure that would be okay. Yeah, you're supposed to tell me what color to use. Therapist says, you would like for me to make the decision for you. Yeah, everybody else does. Everybody else would just decide for you, so you think I should too. But in here, you can decide the color you want your frog to be. It's going to be blue, the world's first blue frog. You're funny. I seem different to you because I don't tell you what to do. Yeah, like a blue frog. So as you can see, there's a lot going on here. At first, the child is a little dependent on the therapist. They're a little hesitant. They don't know if they can choose a different color than what a normal frog looks like. They're asking for permission to do something different. But you're telling them you get to choose. You get to choose what color you paint your frog. You get to choose what color to use. And then, you know, the child gets a little frustrated and says, you're supposed to tell me what color to use. And you all you do is reflect that feeling back. You would like for me to make the decision for you. And then they talk about how, yes, everyone else does. And you, again, are just reflecting those feelings back. So everyone else would just decide for you. So you think I should too. But in here, you can decide the color you want your frog to be. And then they decide that they're going to paint it blue. So this facilitates creativity. It opens the door for the child to make the decision. It enhances their ability to self-direct because you're not choosing for them. You're not making decisions for them. They're making the decisions themselves about literally everything they do in the playroom. The therapist creates differences. So the therapist is unique and their responses likely differ from other adults in the child's life. Acceptance, respect for the child's uniqueness, and sensitivity to the feelings of the child are apparent in the relationship. The complete, undivided attention received in the playroom for 45 minutes a session is a unique experience. And it's particularly unique because the therapist is fully present, fully accepting, and reflecting feelings, and is fully with the child. So many adults are busy and have many items on the to-do list, and they struggle to be fully present and actually experience the child. But the therapy room and play relationship is 100% dedicated to the child. The therapist is attentive to the child. The therapist reflects feelings. The therapist observes, listens, makes statements of recognition, and empathically listens, and listens for needs, wants, fantasies, and feelings. And listens not only to verbalizations of the child, but is observant of the child's play, the toys selected, and what the child may be conveying through play. The personality of the therapist is intentional, the therapist is self-aware, and the therapist works to incorporate these qualities into their relationships with children. The therapist is objective enough to accept the child for the separate person that they are, and flexible. The therapist is flexible enough to accommodate and accept changes in the child. How the therapist feels about the child is more important than what the therapist knows about the child. So again, we're focusing on that relationship as the most facilitative factor of change. So if the therapist is not warm and not caring, it doesn't matter how much they might read into their behavior or perceive about the child, the relationship is really the driver. So we want to make sure that the feelings about the child are positive. So play therapists do not judge or evaluate. The therapist accepts the child's choice to play or to not play, or to talk or not talk. So the therapist does not, evaluate. So let's say that the child comes to you and says, "What do you think about my picture?" And you could say something like, "It seems like you really want to know what I'm thinking." Or you could say something like, "Ooh, there's some green there. It looks like there's black. You've got lines all the way up that page, and it looks like you worked hard on it." But you're not saying whether or not you like it. The therapist is open-minded. When the therapist is comfortable, they allow the child to be as free as they are. The therapist is open to the reality of the child. So the therapist is patient. They don't mind the child's process being what it is. So this allows the therapist to really enter and see the world of the child because they're not directing the play of the child. Such patience is anchored in the child-centered play therapist's belief that the child is interdirectional, constructive, forward-moving, creative, and self-healing. So if the child is being destructive, the therapist understands that that's maybe part of that child's process. There's a high tolerance for ambiguity. So whether the child talks or not, it doesn't matter. They're still giving you plenty to work with through their play. If the child doesn't know what to do, that's okay too. They're future-minded, so this enhances the natural capability of the child to self-actualize. So the idea is that the therapist believes in that forward movement of the child and doesn't stay stuck in a belief that the child is not worthy, not capable, or that they won't overcome whatever it is that they are struggling with. The therapist has personal courage and can admit mistakes and be vulnerable at times. They're also open to risk-taking in the therapy room. So that's part of being genuine and real. So the therapist can admit mistakes. Being real, warmth, caring, acceptance, and sensitive understanding. So we always want to have a gentle tone of voice, a soft face. We want to be warm, accepting, and understanding of that child. And personally secure. So if a therapist is anxious, that can come across in the counseling relationship. And have a sense of humor. So we need to have a sense of humor and just kind of have fun with the child. So self-discovery of therapists through play therapy. So we can learn a whole lot about ourselves in relation to children when we start this work as well. So Keith says that one of the clearest discoveries I had in my play therapy sessions has been a realization that I'm too impatient. I've not learned to wait, and this compounds the experience of stress. Perhaps this is why it's difficult for me to see things from any perspective but my own. I've learned that I need to respond to the child instead of trying to make a good response. When Justin refused to leave the playroom, I was able to stand patiently by the door and experience how effective acceptance of feelings and permissiveness can be when he walked out the door under his own steam after only a couple of minutes. So it can be really anxiety producing when maybe we set a limit and the child doesn't follow through, but we have to just be patient and continue to firmly set the limit in an accepting and positive way. And sometimes you just have to wait. So if you say, "I know you would like to continue to stay in the playroom, but our time is up," and you stand by the door and hold the door, they may defy you for one whole minute, and that can feel like an eternity, but it's really not that long in the grand scheme of things, and they will typically come around and follow your limit setting. So Douglas says that the second session brought with it the realization of one of my worst apprehensions, the child who continually asks questions. It was obvious from the types of questions Eric asked that he had a poor self-concept. It seemed to be difficult for him to rely on his own judgment or to decide for himself how to use this time in the playroom. For me, it was difficult to answer his questions simply and then give the lead back to Eric. He sought my approval on almost every new activity he took on. Some of my responses were facilitative, others were not. I learned that the inconsistency can facilitate more questions, which in turn increases my anxiety and my inappropriate responses. I think it's important to remember that the child learns something from what I say. It's important to communicate that I have faith in the child's own judgments, that he can learn to rely on his own judgments. The responsibility to change or not change is in the child's hands. What a boost for the child's self-confidence, self-respect, and self-esteem. So, when we choose to give the responsibility back to the child, if the child says, what am I supposed to play with? And you say, okay, go over there and play with the dollhouse for a while. Well, then the child will play with the dollhouse and then come back to you for approval. I played with the dollhouse, now what do I do? This creates overdependence. And so what Douglas was struggling with was the child asking a lot of questions and the child, leaning on him and seeking approval. So you can say things like, and here you get to decide what you play, or you get to make that choice, or in here, it's whatever you want it to be. If a child says, what color is this? What toy is this? In here, it's what you would like for it to be. We don't label the toys or the colors for them. And in doing so, as the child makes more and more decisions and starts to self-direct, the child has a boost in self-confidence and self-esteem. All right, so Ching, the play therapist, says that during his play therapy sessions, I found that initially the child felt strange with me because of my differences in nationality and speech pattern, and also because I was too quiet and not responsive enough. The initial difference set an unfamiliar stage for the child, and then my reserved or quiet behavior added to the unfamiliarity. I learned that I must increase my rate of response to help put the child at ease. So this is a good insight. The child may not speak, so then what do we reflect and what do we respond to? Well, we reflect and respond to the content that they're creating through their play. So even if they're standing in the middle of the room, not sure what to play, you can say, seems like you're not sure about this, or just trying to decide what to do next, right? So we don't want to bombard them with too many responses, but we also don't want to sit there silently because then we're not facilitating their growth. So, we need to have a pretty consistent rate of response. Okay, so this is a good time for you to think about, what discoveries you might experience in the relationship with the child. And this may not be something you learn until you actually try it, but it's something to think about. Okay, so we're going to stop there. That was chapter 6, and we are going to move on to chapter 7 in just a moment. Thanks again, and I'll see you soon.